Hello everyone, this is Denise at Something Beautiful Handcrafts, and this is just a little quick segment from the Spinner's Book of Yarn Design. Previously we were talking about single yarn. It's really not appropriate to call it single ply yarn because ply infers that you have two, and you really don't. It's just a single. Now we talked about how to spin singles, how to spin them in slubs also, and the slubs help you learn how to control the drafting for your singles. It also prepares you to spin fat singles, which are wonderfully useful if you like to knit or weave thicker singles, which I do, and you want to get them even, which I do. Okay, now after that, of course, we talk about plying. So once you can make the single you want, then you may want to ply the yarn. Why do we ply yarn? Well, it creates a balance, okay? And what it does is it takes care of that active twist that is left in a single yarn that would otherwise cause your item to be biased or skewed. Of course, we know that sometimes you want that bias, depending on what it is you're doing with that single yarn. And there are other ways to mitigate that bias in the single yarn. And one of them just happens to be plying. Now, I would probably say, and the book does too, that the most frequent ply that is used is probably the two ply. Two ply for me is a quick and dirty method. It's just easy. You just put the two singles together and ply. Now, and it's very useful, okay, for all types of things, just two ply. Me personally, with the exception of socks, I really don't have any reason to use anything other than two ply, but there are quite a few reasons. At any rate, you have to, since you're trying to balance a yarn, which is kind of the whole point of plying, you really have to watch the amount of twist that you are putting into the ply. And you know how much twist you need to put into the ply based on several factors. And one of them is how much twist you put into the single, because you're trying to balance out the twist that's in the single. If you try to put low twist into a high twist single, you're going to wind up with a skewed yarn, which kind of defeats the purpose, or you're going to get some effects in the yarn that you may not have wanted, okay? So for the most part, rule of thumb is if it's a low twist single, you need a low ply. If it's a high twist single, you need a high ply. And some of that, of course, is based on the fiber. If Angora Merino versus Lincoln Long Wool or Romney or Cheviot or all that kind of thing. So kind of factor in all those little bits like that. Now, for different types of yarn, different weights of yarn, you have to consider that too. A really nice low twist single and a low twist ply with a really nice bulky yarn would be really fluffy. That'll give it that kind of characteristics, but not very durable. So if you try to put a really fine yarn with too low a twist, it might not hold it together and it would look sloppy. Like, for example, Angora needs a higher twist. If you ply it at a lower twist, the plies are likely to come apart. Okay, so make your samples. I'm all about the samples. Let it spin back on itself. Samples, take it off, wash it, do all that kind of stuff to it, so you'll know what it's going to look like before you ply up the whole thing and realize that the ply is not enough. There's not enough twist. Because the thing about putting twist in fibers and plying fibers is that I can't really give you a mathematical equation to say that you have enough twist in the fiber. When the fiber is done and you're looking at the yarn and you say to yourself, oh, I didn't put enough twist in there. Well, it's kind of late for that. So the best thing to do to figure that out is to make a sample before you go through with the whole procedure. Then you can adjust those samples before you spin up, a whole 4 ounces or whatever it is you're spinning up on it. Samples. I'm all about samples. Okay, so now, anyway, the book goes to mention something I think is really important, where it says that a balanced ply is not the same as balanced yarn. By balancing it when you're plying means you're putting the same amount of tension on all the plies, okay? So it's making it look nice and even. If you are not putting the right amount of tension on both of the plies, or all of the plies, if you're plying more than 3 ply, you're going to end up shorter on one of these singles, and they're going to spiral around the other singles, or they will buckle or loop. Now, if you're making a boucle yarn, never forgot how to say that. Okay, so anyway, if you're making that type of curly yarn, or you're making corkscrew, or you're making beehives, or you're making spiral yarns, you are purposely making the plies uneven. One might be tighter than the other, one might be at a different angle than the other, and you are causing them on purpose to create buckles or loops. But in general, if that's not what you're trying to go for and you want a smooth yarn, then you need to make sure they are under the same tension, held at the same type of angles. Okay, so when you go in the book, you have pictures of that, and it shows you how to hold the yarn in order to get that type of control. Now, in some instances, you may want to use more than 2 ply yarn. Oh, the beauties of 2 ply yarn, of course, is that it's quick. It's less fiber than 3 ply yarns, but also it tends to be a flatter yarn. And see, this is why I brought my 2 examples, but unfortunately, these 2 examples don't really show you very well, because this is some type of meat down-ish breed. And even in a 2 ply and spun worsted and smooth, it still has loft, and it's springy, and it tends to look more round. That is just the characteristic of this particular fiber. If I had been able to find a different example, I think I've used up all my yarns. For the most part, you would see a yarn that was flatter, which is really what I wanted you to see. And then in this case, this stuff right here is some type of bamboo craziness. It's that mixed one from the sock video. So it is very compact, and it doesn't, unfortunately, doesn't represent what I would want to show you, the difference between a 2 ply and a 3 ply. But generally, the 2 ply is flatter, smoother. The 3 ply tends to be rounded. So if you're making lace where you really want that good crisp stitch definition, singles and 2 ply are great yarns for that. Okay. Now, if you are interested in things like sweaters, and where you're knitting cables, that rounded look of 3 ply is great too, and it wears well, and it's got more cushion to it. It really gives you that cushiony look or feeling, and that's one of the reasons why the 3 ply is generally the standard for socks. Okay, the cushion factor, the roundness, the sturdiness, and the durability of the 3 ply. So very seldom do I actually use 3 ply, except when I am making socks. And there's a really cute picture in the book about 3 ply versus 2 ply. And there are some lace designs, and you can see really well with the stitch definition that the 2 ply in the holes, and I'm just going to kind of flash it real quick. I don't want to, break any copyright rules, so I'm just going to flash it real quick. Okay, and for the 2 ply yarn, the holes in the lace open up wider than the 3 ply yarn. But also the cable looks nice and it's much beefier with the 3 ply yarn. So keep that in mind when you're choosing the plies. And then the book goes to talk about ways to ply from a center pull ball, from ending plying, and of course plying from bobbins. Now with the ladybug. I have 5 bobbins, maybe 6, I can't remember. I still do most of my plying as 2 plying, and I didn't have a lazy Kate for the longest time. So a lot of times I still ply from the center pull ball because it gives me the advantage of spinning 4 ounces or whatever. If I'm doing 4 ounces, if I'm doing more than 4 ounces, then that's when the lazy Kate comes in. But it gives me that advantage of spinning that, center pulling it and plying it to the end without having anything left over, without trying to balance how much is on each bobbin. That, to me, that's kind of nerve-wracking. If it's your thing, hey, go for it. So very seldom do I use any more than 1 bobbin. I usually wind off onto a ball winder and center pull. If I am plying large amounts for weaving, in that case, I spin till I fill up a bobbin, and then after I've got several bobbins, then I would ply from the lazy Kate now. So that's how I usually do it. But I am a big fan of center pull ball plying, and it has its drawbacks. And somewhere I think I have a video where I discussed some of the benefits and drawbacks of center pull ball plying. I've never done much ending plying, but it is a very useful technique for those who use spindles. And I could go into it, but I think I'd be better off referencing someone who uses it really well in order to for you to get the maximum benefit from learning about ending plying. Now, one thing I do a lot of, or used to do a lot of, was chain plying, also known as Navajo plying, but that is a controversial term, so I'm just going to call it chain plying. It's so much easier. Not trying to be politically correct, but I am trying to be efficient. And chain plying describes exactly what it is. Basically, what you are doing is making a crochet loop, and that's how I think about it, or I thought about when I learned how to do it. To me, it's just making a crochet loop, except instead of a hook, I'm using my hand to grab the yarn and pull it through. The chain ply yarn, or you'll hear people say that when they do it, they get a lot of bumps. There is a key to that, because I have chain plied really fine yarns, Angora yarns, and you could not tell that my yarn was chain plied. And I have a picture somewhere, I'm not sure if I talked about in the video, where I had spindle spun a couple 100 yards of Angora, and when I tried to get it off of the spindle, it got all tangled, and so I had to piece together this yarn like with knots, and I chain plied it, and the plies were so smooth that you could not even see them. And I actually won a skein competition with that yarn, and I turned it into a shawl, which I still have, beaded shawl. Okay, so at any rate, it can be done. One of the things I do when I chain ply is I pull out the longest possible chain, like arm's length, as much as I possibly can. So even if there are any bumps in the ply that might be visible, you're so far apart from each other that it's not going to make the yarn look unsightly. I want to say offhand that I have a video where I am chain plying already. It's an older video. It's probably at least 3 years old. But if anybody's interested in me walking through a chain ply, or even walking through the center pull ball ply again, I would be more than happy to do that. Chain plying is so effective when you have a fiber that is dyed in long colorways. And there are ways to split the braids and try to match up the colors, which is not a problem if that is what you want. Sometimes some of the colors what I'm doing, I don't want them to overlap at all. Like, it just bothers me. I'm a chromophobe. We talked about that. So I want them to match, and chain plying is the easiest way to get that going. So then there's that. And then the book goes into something that I really have to sit down and talk with you guys about. So I'm just going to say it here, but it probably needs a video all by itself. There is a tiny little section in the book that is super meaty, but it talks about the Great Sock Experiment. And it talks about what types of yarns are best for socks. I want to say it was like 2 years ago I did the sock article for Ply magazine. Amazing. What the little teeny section that's in this book was enough to fill an entire magazine for Ply. And I'm telling you, I don't even think they could even touch. It probably could be another magazine issue talking about how to make good socks. I mean, they just could go on again with that one. And so there's a lot to unpack in that little tiny section. And I'll just talk about it quickly because I love socks. Okay, that is enough for today. You just listened to me prattle on for 15 minutes without much to look at. Sorry about that. I have to figure out what to do with those videos where it's more talking and not so much action. We'll see. Maybe I'll just spin in the background while I talk. At any rate, thank you for listening. If you have not, go to the Facebook group Spin by Design and join me there. I'm not posting as frequently as I was, but I'm still looking at the group. So if you spark up a conversation, I will join you, and I'm pretty sure plenty of other people will. You can also catch me on Instagram, Something Beautiful Handcrafts. My new website is up, and I'm actually publishing blog posts fairly frequently, which is nice. SomethingBeautifulHandcrafts.com. If you have any other questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And have a nice day and stay warm if you're in the U.S. in the middle of this polar vortex.